Welcome back, riders. Recently, I was able to get back to Six Flags New England and ride Wicked Cyclone and Superman the Ride for my first time in 8 years. For a very long time, these were the two coasters I wanted a rewrite on the most. So that got me thinking, now that I've conquered those two, what other roller coasters do I really want to rewrite on? In this video, I'll be covering 25 roller coasters I want to rewrite the most. As always, let's lay some ground rules. Number one, self-explanatory, I must have ridden the roller coaster for it to qualify for this list. Number two, no defunct coasters will be included. As much as I would love to get back on Dragon Challenge, it's just not physically possible, so I won't be including them. Three, I will not consider any roller coasters that are simply just elite coasters. Of course, I would love to get back on Maverick because that's my favorite roller coaster of all time. But I've ridden that over 100 times and as recently as 2 weeks ago. So, in the spirit of this video, for what I'm going for, that's not enough to make the cut. Pretty much anything else is on the table though, and I'll be covering them on a case by case basis. 4. This is not a ranked video. These are just simply my top 25 in alphabetical order. Let's get into the list. First up is All American Triple Loop at Indiana Beach. This is actually my most ridden roller coaster I'll be covering on this list, excluding one special exemption later in the video. Across my 11 rides this year, you can say I've come to understand everything that All American Triple Loop has to offer. So, why do I need to rewrite it? Well, if you didn't hear the news, Indiana Beach literally came from nowhere and recently removed the over the shoulder restraints. Long story short, these restraints were a nightmare, to put it lightly, and severely holding back the coaster from relative greatness. Now that they're gone, I'm dying to get back to the park to try out newish and improved All American Triple Loop. Next up is one of the more famous roller coasters out there, Black Mamba at Phantasialand. I was able to ride this 4 times while at the park, and I was ever so slightly underwhelmed. I do not think the layout was all that great. Sure, the layout is awesome since it's basically built on the ground and interacts with fantastic theming, but I was hoping for some more intensity, I guess. But the reason I really want to reride this is because I really want to try something I did not do for any of my 4 rides, and that is ride in the front row. Inverts, especially from B&M, make it quite hard to see what's in front of you if you're sitting anywhere else except the front row. And on a ride like Block Mamba, where the sights are a huge part of the ride, I wish I gave the front row a ride since I wasn't really ever able to see and fully appreciate the theming on my rides. And next is Cannibal at Lagoon. This is pretty much the new Wicked Cyclone for me. It's my highest ranked coaster that I have not been on in the longest time. I rode Cannibal twice in 2017, so it's been a little over 7 years now, and my memory only serves me so well. Each passing year got harder and harder to rank Wicked Cyclone, and Cannibal has been in that same boat. The problem is that I have literally no idea when I'm going to make it back to Lagoon. Emperor at SeaWorld San Diego is one that I feel like I've mentioned fairly often. This is the first coaster on the list that I have only ridden once. Naturally, more specifically for the bigger and better and custom coasters out there, it's hard for me to rank coasters that I've only been on once. I feel like that second and third ride really helped me solidify my opinions and helped me recall the experience better. I was underwhelmed with my single ride on Emperor, and it seems like I'm in the minority of people that don't really care for Emperor. But I can't change my mind until I ride it again, and it's been closed on my last 2 visits to the park. Next was a huge 2023 winner for me, Eurosat Can coaster at Europa Park. This is another coaster I only rode once, but unlike Emperor, I don't doubt my feelings and opinions on this coaster. I had an absolute blast on this coaster, and I loved it. I know I said I wouldn't consider rides simply because they are great, but I feel like Eurosat is an exception because one, it's not truly elite, and two, I have no idea if I'll ever make it back to Europa Park. I would have sacrificed one of my rerides on Wodan for another ride on Eurosat. I enjoyed it that much. The line was just too long, and unfortunately, my second ride did not happen when I was there. Alright, you might be thinking, Dan, you're crazy. Why would you want to re-ride Firebird at Six Flags America? This is one of the worst coasters out there, at least according to everyone. Maybe it is. But Firebird has a couple things going for me. One, it holds slight weight for me since it used to be at Six Flags Great America, my home park, so I'm slightly biased and a little nostalgic, I guess. Number two, I have only ridden this once. Number three, I have not ridden this in 10 years, so that means number four, I have only ridden it as a stand up. I feel like it has enough going for it with the floorless trains and everything I mentioned that I'm intrigued and I'd like to give it another spin. Getting out of the one ride entries, we have Giant Dipper at Belmont Park. I have done this 3 times on two separate visits, about 2 years apart, and I would say I got a decent feel for the ride, but I have heard that since my last ride, it's actually received a lot of attention. That intrigues me enough to want to re-ride, given that it's a pretty crazy coaster and I'd probably like it even more if it's since been upgraded. Moving on from Giant Dipper at Belmont Park, I have a Giant Dipper at Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk now. I have two rides on this, one in the front, one in the back, and I was really let down by this coaster. I feel like everyone hypes it up, saying it's a top 5 or even top 3 coaster in Northern California, and I strongly disagree. And I didn't even ride half the coasters in Northern California, and I still disagree. It was a really rainy and colder day when I rode, windy too, so I'm willing to give it some benefit of the doubt, but obviously I won't know for sure until I get back on it. From one coaster impacted from subpar conditions to another, we have Goliath at Wallaby Holland. If you have not heard the story by now, we got rained out of our planned day at Wallaby Holland, so we did some shuffling around and we were able to make it for a few morning hours the next day. And it just seemed like Goliath was running pretty slow for all three of my rides. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt, and hopefully, if I ever make it back to the park, the weather will be at least average. Back to a handful of coasters I was only able to ride once. First is Judge Roy Scream at Six Flags Over Texas. I rode in the back, and I thought it had some potential, but was a little lackluster. The reason I'd like to re-ride this is because I wish I also tried the front. I've come to realize lately that it's not uncommon for wooden coasters to be better towards the front, and I've since heard other people say that Judge Ice Cream is better in the front, so I'd like to give it a spin. Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg is on here for an obvious reason, and that is the major refurbishment it just received since I last rode it. Honestly, I have not heard many reviews on Loch Ness 2.0, and I can't imagine it's like that different, but still, it's something I want to try. Even without the refurbishment, I would have liked more than one ride on this, as it is one of the most unique aero loopers. But even with my one ride, I felt I understood the ride adequately. But again, there's since been a big refurb, so trying to get back on it. Next is Matterhorn bobsleds at Disneyland Park, specifically the Tomorrowland side. And that's for three reasons. One, I've only been on it once. Two, at my last visit to the park, I got on the ride, but got evacuated at the base of the lift hill, so I didn't get to ride it. And three, I still can't quite differentiate the two sides. I know the Tomorrowland side is crazier, but I haven't really been able to figure out why, and I won't be able to unless I ride it more. So it's a little disappointing I've been on the Fantasyland side more. All right, this next one has a bit of baggage, but I'll try and explain my case. We're talking about Montezuma's Revenge at Knott's Berry Farm. Again, I was only able to ride this once, and I absolutely loved it. I was really surprised by it. But of course, the baggage is the current state of this coaster. It has not operated in years. It was supposed to receive a big renovation, but the project has looked awfully dead, despite the park expressing that the project is still happening. So it's hard to include this coaster because it may very well never operate again, and if it does, it would probably be a much different experience. But I'll include it anyways because it's my video and I want to. Okay, on a nicer side, this ride was slash is fantastic, and given how much I was let down by Psyche Underground, that makes me really, really wish I got a reride on OG Montezuma's Revenge. Next is Pantheon at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Yet another coaster I only rode once. I will say I was able to ride to Tatus twice, which is a similar yet better version of Pantheon, but I still would really like another ride on Pantheon. My ride was one of the first public trains of the day, but at least I was able to get the front row, but I'd really like to try the back for that spike and the top hat. From a bunch of coasters with only one ride to a coaster with a handful, we have Screamin' Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis. I feel like I've told this story a few times, but long story short, my first ever ride on Screamin' Eagle was absolutely fantastic. Every single ride since then, so in total I have 9 rides, they have not even come close to that first ride at all. Even my last ride was the worst ride I've ever had on it. I don't know what it is. But until I find that first ride experience again, Scream Eagle might be on this list forever. Back to a handful of coasters with only one ride, starting with Shockwave at Six Flags Over Texas. Everybody talks about that legendary ride in the back row. Unfortunately, I was only able to get one ride, and it wasn't even in the back car. The best I could do was third to back row. I still thought the ride was good. Still one of my favorite Schwarzkopfs, for sure, but not that legendary experience that it seems like everyone has raved about. Obviously, I wanted to ride this more than once, but it was down for most of my time at the park. I'm honestly fortunate for that one ride, honestly. The next two coasters are some of the biggest coasters on the list in size. First up being Superman El Ultimo Escape at Six Flags Mexico. This coaster really is only on the list for one reason, one ride. Went through all the trouble to go to Six Flags Mexico and was only able to snag one ride in the back. At least we got on it. I'm definitely thankful for that. I would have been even more mad if I didn't get on it at all. But that doesn't mean it's exempt from this list. I would have liked to try the front, or simply just the back again, since it's a great coaster. Next is Superman Escape from Krypton at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This is a coaster that is usually closed when I visit, but I have been able to ride it 3 times and I have a decent feel for the ride. However, I've only ridden it backwards. Now that one of the trains is forwards, I'd really like to try that, even if it's worse. A lot of the coasters on this list are rides I rode a couple of times or once, and I thought it wasn't running as well as they could have been, or I didn't think as highly as I thought I would, or what other people think, whatever. Timber Terror at Silverwood is the opposite. I think if I went back on Timber Terror, it would take a big stumble down my rankings. This is because I only rode it when it had buzz bars. And it was a hot day and it was flying. I could not stay in my seat, at least for the first half of the ride. It was amazing. But I'm a fair man and I'll play devil's advocate here. If I went back on it now, I bet I would not think nearly as highly as I do now. This one is just plain sad, but I gotta put Top Throw 2 from Cedar Point on here. I understand I was extremely lucky and fortunate to get on this at all. But that said, it was only one time. I at least got the front row, something I never even did with Top Throw Dragster, but the enthusiast in me has been dying to see what it's like in the back row. Hopefully someday. Fans of the channel or friends of mine probably saw this coming, but I have Untamed at Wallaby Holland. This is pretty much the same explanation as Goliath, naturally, since, I spent the same time at the park there, except it's even more magnified for Untamed. I was beyond let down by Untamed. It's my least favorite RMC coaster by a long shot. That's even including the single rails. And I know it should not be. This coaster should be knocking on the door of my top 25 coasters, and that's if it wasn't already in the top 25. And I have it all the way down at 175. And that's not even an up to date ranking. I've written around 100 credits since I've ranked my credits last time. I know I'm not ranking the coasters within this video, but if I did, this would have to be number one. I bet you are all shocked to find Viper at Six Flags Great America on this list. And no, this is not a joke. But Dan, isn't Six Flags Great America your home park? Yes. But Dan, isn't Viper literally one of, if not your most ridden roller coaster? Yes. But there is a special stipulation with this entry. I am specifically talking about Repiv, or Viper backwards. In my time as an enthusiast, Viper ran backwards for part of the 2013 and 2017 seasons, and I would say we are overdue for it to return. Now, I know PTC supposedly put the kebab on running their trains backwards, but I'm an optimistic guy. I like to think never say never. Actually, I was doing a little digging to see which years it ran backwards, and I found a video of an April 2022 Village of Garni meeting. And in that meeting, Park President John Craniac stated that 2 rides would run backwards that season, but it wasn't specified which rides would run backwards. As far as I know/remember, no rides ended up running backwards that 2022 season, and maybe that was due to PTC because the only rides that the park previously ran backwards at any point was American Eagle, Viper, and Batman. And who even knows where the Batman backwards train is? It might be dead for all we know. And the other two options run PTC trains, so that checks out with PTC maybe stepping in and saying no. Of course, the park could have chosen something they have never ran backwards before, but I digress. I'm going on way too much of a tangent. What I'm trying to say here is that it's possible, they're overdue, and I want to do it again. Six Flags America is the only park I went to in 2016 or earlier that I have since not revisited. I was extremely young as both a coaster enthusiast and just in general when I last visited the park, and I think that has always been extremely evident from my thoughts on Wild One. To this day, I still rank Wild One as a bottom 5 coaster for me overall. Every single year. I just remember this ride being incredibly rough and unenjoyable. I will fully acknowledge that I was just young and dumb. I probably rode on a wheel seat, and that was like my first experience with a wooden coaster that has a little bite. Literally nobody else says that Wild One is as bad of an experience that I had on it, so I desperately need to get back on it now that I'm a seasoned veteran. Arguably the most famous coaster on this list is X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This is a coaster I have a decent amount of experience on with 9 lifetime rides, but it makes the list for 2 reasons. One, it was closed on my last trip to California and I'm still butthurt about it. Two, is that I have yet to ride it with onboard audio. Heck, I have not heard the station audio since 2022. So until I get on that onboard audio ride, X2 will remain on this list. Last but certainly not least is the Stripper Purpern at Bay Beach Amusement Park. This is pretty much the same explanation as Judge Roy Scream. I really wish I tried this in the front, but I didn't have much time with the park and there was some incoming rain. There was actually a line like 30 to 45 minutes I was shocked about. And I rode in the back for my first ride, and then I wanted to do the front for my second ride. And when I got to the station, it was literally like a 5 train wait for even row two. So I just took an empty row in the back. And there you have it, my top 25 roller coasters that I hope to get a reride on someday. What are some coasters you have not been on in a long time that you're dying to get back on? Or maybe some redemption rides you're looking for? Or anything else you want to re-ride for whatever reason? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for checking out the video. Push down, pull up, exit to the right. Hope you enjoyed the video, and go have your greatest day yet. Choo choo, bye!